Breaking news, Donald Trump's Department of Justice has crossed a major red line in the weaponization and criminalization of politics. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
All right, Paige, I wrote on January 28th in Democracy Docket that we were going to see the weaponization of the federal government against Donald Trump's political opponents. I warned that we would see criminal prosecutions. And here we are just 4 months later, and the first of those criminal prosecutions are in front of us. This involving a Democratic Congresswoman from New Jersey who was doing her job in conducting congressional oversight, now being subject to criminal charges by none other than Alina Habba, one of Donald Trump's crony lawyers, a former parking garage lawyer turned Trump sycophant, part of his motley criminal defense crew, who is now the acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey.
This all stems from an incident earlier this month at an ICE detention center near Newark, New Jersey, where 3 Democratic representatives and the mayor of Newark went to this ICE detention center to conduct a congressional oversight visit, which, as Democratic lawmakers point out, there is explicit authority for members of Congress to do unannounced oversight visits at DHS facilities. They tried to enter the facility. There were clashes between the ICE agents, the Democratic lawmakers, and protesters as well. DHS posted a video of what they say is Congresswoman LaMonica McIver assaulting an ICE official. From that incident, the Newark mayor was arrested and charged with misdemeanor trespassing. Alina Habba announced that those charges would be dropped. She also said she tried to come to a peaceful resolution with McIver over the incident, and Habba had no choice but to criminally charge her.
Yeah, look, you all just saw that video. This is nothing short of political misuse of the Department of Justice, okay? The fact is that, as Paige said, members of Congress have an absolute right to enter and inspect these detention facilities. It is in the law. It is something that Republican members of Congress have taken advantage of in the past. Democratic members of Congress have taken advantage of it in the past. And what you see in that video is an administration that did not want that oversight to take place. And it ginned up this fake controversy. First, it inconvenienced the members of Congress, and it ginned up this fake controversy, first involving the mayor of Newark, now involving this freshman congresswoman. And look, everyone, this is what we have been warning about. This is what all of us, people watching this video, Paige and I, have been concerned is going to happen. It is the use of the power of the federal government by a Trump crony. This is not a career prosecutor. This is not someone who, is even ever been a federal prosecutor. This is someone who is loyal to Donald Trump, who is trying to intimidate oversight of the Trump administration through these bogus investigations and criminal charges. And we cannot allow this kind of stuff to happen without us calling it out for what it is and taking it all in through the political lens that it is being offered.
In a statement, McIver said, "The charges against me are purely political. They mischaracterize and distort my actions and are meant to criminalize and deter legislative oversight." And Marc, I think that connects back to a point you made, that it's not just that the Trump administration wants to punish their so-called political enemies. They don't want oversight over their actions, right? They don't want Congress asserting its power as an equal branch of government to say, we have the right to overlook what you're doing and step in when it's unlawful.
Yeah, look, this is the same administration that, shipped people illegally to a foreign gulag and have been ignoring and defying court orders ever since. The fact is that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in one case, 7-2 in another, saying that they were not giving appropriate due process. It's not easy for the Trump administration to lose 9-0 in this Supreme Court. It's not easy for them to lose 7-2, frankly, in this Supreme Court, but they're doing it because they have a sense of arrogance about their power and their ability to do things that is coupled with utter stupidity. I want to show this clip of Kristi Noem describing what she thinks habeas corpus is.
Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am.
Suspend their
Habeas
right to.
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
Habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people.
Okay, let's just be clear. The writ of habeas corpus, called the Great Writ, is actually a limitation on the executive branch. It is not a right of the president. It is actually a limitation on the president and on the executive branch that goes back to Old England, when there needed to be a check on a king. And what it does is it gives the right of anyone, any person who believes they are being wrongly held or wrongly detained by the government, to go to a judge, a federal judge in this instance, and make their case about why they are being wrongly detained and should be released. That's what habeas corpus is. It is the right of individuals, citizens and non-citizens alike, not to be wrongly detained by the government. The fact that the Secretary of DHS, who does these photo ops where she goes to these gulags in these ghoulish videos, the fact that she thinks habeas corpus is a right of the president either betrays the utter stupidity of this administration or its callousness and effort to spread disinformation. Now, Paige, why do I connect this to this situation in New Jersey? Because they are of a same piece. They are trying to mislead, either again through stupidity or deliberately, the American people into believing that the victim of all of this is somehow Donald Trump, that the victim of all of this is somehow the Trump administration, when in fact, what it is one abuse of power after another abuse of power. The misstatements, I mean, we all saw, and I'm not going to bother playing the clip from several weeks ago of Stephen Miller, of all people, describing what the Supreme Court did in the 9-0 case that Donald Trump lost in terms that are unrecognizable to anyone who has read the Supreme Court decision. So I am sure, Paige, that as this New Jersey situation unfolds, we are going to be subjected, and the audience is going to be subjected to more and more disinformation and misinformation and just outright lies and stupidity. That's the reason why we're doing this video on such a rushed basis. It is the reason, Paige, why you and I, it's so important that everyone know that. It is the reason why, everyone, you need to know that Paige and I do these videos is to keep you informed so that you have accurate, good information about what's happening to democracy and the courts, and that you can share it with your friends. So I want you to do me a favor right now and make sure you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. Make sure you click the bell so that you are alerted when we post new videos. And please share these with your friends, because the fact is we cannot have this kind of misinformation, disinformation out there. And it's really important that everybody knows what's really going on.
Marc, I want to go back to something you just said, which is that the Trump administration wants to make itself seem like the victim in all of these situations. That is trying, right, to posture itself as we're trying to do all of these great things, but we keep running into all of these roadblocks and impediments. The roadblocks being the U.S. Constitution and federal law, reining in abuses of power. But the Trump administration is trying to be like, we're the ones who are being wronged here. We're trying to help people. And we have this stupid piece of paper called the U.S. Constitution standing in our way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how they view it. I think they view the U.S. Constitution as just a stupid piece of paper. Donald Trump has no regard for democracy. He has no reverence for the U.S. Constitution. He views it, as you say, as in the way of his exercising complete power. And when you have these three members of Congress show up and, exercise their constitutional rights, empowered, by the way, by that piece of paper, right? The Article 1 is about the legislative power, and the power of Congress to do oversight is part of that legislative power. And And, he views that as a threat to his absolute power. I think, Paige, we cannot let this episode go by without noting that of all of the people he targeted here, he chose to target a freshman member of Congress, a newly elected member, a Black woman who took Don Payne when he passed away, long-term congressman, won his seat in a Democratic election, democratically held election. She is as much a member of Congress as anyone else. But you notice who he chose to pick as his first target for the criminalization of politics, for the weaponization of the Department of Justice against his political opponents, whether he was directly involved, whether it was Stephen Miller, or whether it was just Alina Habba, or whether it was just Alina Habba acting on her own, I don't know. But I don't think it's any surprise that this is where the administration wound up landing in its first criminal prosecution.
Marc, I think it's also important to talk about, and if you can offer some insight on this, of how rare it is for the Department of Justice to go after an elected official like this. The Washington Post reported that the DOJ is considering doing away with a policy that required prosecutors to get approval from what's called the Public Integrity Unit before they charge elected officials for allegations relating to their campaign or public office. How unusual is it in the grand scheme of things, not just in the Trump administration, to arrest an elected official like this?
Look, it would be unheard of. I mean, the fact is that this member of Congress was doing her job. And, sure, we have members of Congress who occasionally take part in peaceful protests. And as part of the theater of the protests, they allow themselves to be arrested. They're brought to the police station, they're booked, and then they're released. And then that's the end of it. This is actually the opposite of it. She was not arrested at the scene in order to break up some protest because she wasn't there to protest. She was there to actually do her oversight. Instead, she was released and now is being charged with serious felonies. I mean, this is not a joke. Like, this is not, yes, it's a stunt. And I suspect this is all going to get dismissed at the end of the day. I think that a judge is going to throw this charges out, or a jury is. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say and predict today, there is no chance that this member of Congress gets convicted. I hope the judge tosses it out. If not, I fully expect that a jury will acquit. And maybe they don't even go that far. Maybe they just quietly dismiss these charges at some point because they don't want the spectacle of losing this case. But that's what this is about. This is about the spectacle. This is about them normalizing the charging of Democratic members of Congress with felony charges in order to make a point that nobody stands up to them. Because, Paige, look, if you're not a member of Congress, if you're just an average citizen and you want to, stand up against what you see going on with the Trump administration authoritarianism, are you going to be willing to potentially get charged with multiple felonies, or are you just going to stay on the couch? And so that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to intimidate people. But Paige, before we end this episode, I think we've got to sort of recenter on where we are on this timeline. So Donald Trump takes office 4 months ago, and we are told, don't worry, everybody. He's just going to go after the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst, he's gonna go after. And that, he is not going to seek vengeance. He's just going to try to, solve the immigration problem. But Paige, look where we are today.
Right. We've reached the 100-day point in office for Donald Trump. And what we've seen is he is deporting people who have never been involved in a crime in the United States. He's deported children with cancer who are U.S. citizens because their parents aren't U.S. citizens. We have multiple members of the Trump administration saying, what if we just suspend habeas corpus? And now we have a personal attorney of Trump, who is now one of the top prosecutors in the country, saying she's going to charge a member of Congress for doing her job.
Yeah. So here's what I need everyone to do. I need you not to tune this story out. I need you to be paying more attention now than you've ever paid before to what's happening to democracy in court. Because if they are at the point where they are grabbing, students off the streets and putting them in ICE detention centers in Louisiana, they are flying people to foreign gulags, and the U.S. Supreme Court is having to stop that from continuing. It doesn't, by the way, bring those folks back, but you have the Supreme Court involved. If you have members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress being charged with felonies, you have the weaponization of executive orders against law firms. You have the weaponization of executive orders against universities. You have the use of executive power to try to intimidate his political opponents. You continue to have efforts by Donald Trump and his cronies to get the legacy media to back off. If you got all that going on, what you really need is good, accurate information. And that's what Democracy Docket is here to provide. It's why Paige and I do these videos. It's why the team of nearly 20 people now who work at Democracy Docket are putting out the content they are every single day on the website and as part of their newsletters. So please take a second right now. Make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button. Hit the bell to make sure you get updates. And then make sure you are subscribed to Democracy Docket, either for its free or its premium newsletters. The links to both are above and in the description below. It is really important that you stay up to date on everything happening to democracy. That's why I created Democracy Docket. And that's why Paige and I will continue to keep you up to date. We will see you next time.